Staff, can you guys pause and maybe restart?
C10 contractors.
Thanks. That's good.
The installer is warned that over voltages or wrong wiring can lead to an explosion in industry guidance. The competence of this installer is linked to worker and public safety by the manufacturer's own safety documentation. Guidance emphasizes the installation must be conducted by a competent electrician or qualified electrician or installer with specific electrical knowledge, skills, and training. The Tesla installation guidance states that for a Powerwall 2 battery energy storage system, quote, installation should be performed by a certified electrician, unquote. Rapidly developing best technologies and codes and standards that perpetually undergo revision and response require detailed knowledge of multiple hazards and evolving safety requirements. A broad knowledge of NFPA 70 and 70E and conformance with multiple sections of 70 are needed to install BESS. These are listed in existing battery energy storage system checklists for building codes and officials and are generally required in the BESS product installation manuals such as those for the Tesla Powerwall and LG Resu. The safety documentation for both the Tesla Powerwall and LG Resu recognize the serious hazards associated with thermal runaway for their residential use lithium-ion batteries. The Tesla Powerwall 2 has a 90-page installation manual with numerous steps and includes serious safety warnings requiring assessment, decision-making, knowledge of codes and standards. Installing battery energy storage systems requires a skilled assessment of the electrical system that is being connected. Manufacturer safety guidance, relevant codes underscore that BESS on any size or application is not a plug-and-play installation, largely due to BESS inherent hazards and because of the variability of electrical systems with which BESS is connected, require expert site evaluation. Next slide. The main difference between C10 and C46 license holders is that the technical capacity of the C10 workforce is greater than that of the C46 workforce. C10 contractors are required to employ certified electricians to carry out electrical work, whereas C46 contractors are exempt from the certification requirement. Our analysis of the C46, C10 workforces offers a strong contrast of the documented knowledge, skills, and training required by the state of California. Workers performing electrical work under a C10 contractor must be certified with documented requirements. These include passing a California exam and 8,000 hours of experience to be a certified general electrician, or 4,800 hours of experience to be a certified residential electrician. Certified electricians must demonstrate experience and training and pass a test establishing that they have received training in electrical safety and have demonstrated to the state a knowledge of the breadth of the safety provisions in 70 and 70E and other codes that are direct electrical and BESS requirements. Certification requires demonstrated safety competency, including methods of avoiding electrical shock hazards and arc flash, which are addressed in 70E. These methods involve performing risk assessments and protection calculations and wearing appropriate PPE for arc flash and electrical shock, which is also referenced, for example, in the LG Resu installation manual. Other key safety concepts for BESS installation addressed in 70E, part of the competency needed for certification, include lockout tagout, job safety planning, audits, and incident investigation. In a recent amendment, the BESS-specific article in NFPA 70/2020 requires installation and maintenance by qualified personnel, in part defined by NFPA 70E. Certified electricians have state-required competencies in both NFPA 70 and 70E. The team did examine publicly available information related to manufacturers' sponsored training and certification. For the LG Resu and Tesla Powerwall 2, accounting for 97% of the California BESS residential market, the training required for installer certification is very limited in content and duration compared to California certified electricians. For example, For the LG Resu, there is a 1-hour training video, a 49-question online test to become a certified LG Resu installer. Also, LG requires all installers of its batteries to be certified. As 87 to 88% of BESS projects in the residential sector have C10 licenses, it should be the case that 100% of the C10 contractors installing Resu BESS have received LG certified training. Next slide. In conclusion, the review of hazards, risks, and safety strategies, as well as the differences in the workforce requirements between C10 and C46 contractors, point to a preponderance of evidence in favor of restricting C40 contractors from BESS work, even when paired with solar PV. This report's review of the hazards and risks inherent to BESS underscores the importance of technical and safety capabilities necessary for safe BESS installation. Since the main difference between contractors is the certified electrician requirement, and in California, certified electricians working under a C10 contractor have significantly greater documented regulatory requirements for knowledge, skills, and training to safely perform electrical work and BESS installations. The CSLB can best ensure safety by requiring the C10 license for all BESS installations. We recommend that C10 contractors be required for all residential, commercial, and utility scale BESS for the following summary reasons. BESS are a dynamic and expanding technology with inherent hazards that are significant. They have led to serious incidents. They are recognized by the NFPA as a high-risk hazard. They are currently predominantly installed under C10 contractors, requiring the use of certified electricians. They've led to the development of significant code and standard revisions and new safety mitigations. Those electricians have demonstrated skills and safety training needed to address the safety issues identified. Only a tiny percentage of BESS projects have been installed by C46 contractors without a C10 A or B license, and therefore a significant safety record for these contractors simply does not exist. Finally, we find that there lacks a justifiable threshold by size or sector to suggest less hazard or insignificant risk for BESS installation. And we therefore recommend C10 licenses be required for all sizes, customer classes of BESS. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to Bethany Jones.
Thanks, Don. So I'm going to cover the economic analysis that we conducted for this project, addressing really 3 questions. Who is currently installing BESS systems? What is the availability of contractors and the workforce to meet both current and growing demand for BESS? And what might be the cost of restricting the installation contractors? So first, to review who is currently installing solar paired BESS systems. We looked at this data in a number of ways, both by capacity, by number of projects, by region, etc. This is a pie chart showing the distribution by license type in terms of total solar paired BESS capacity in California. And what we see is that the C46 contractors who hold no other qualifying license have installed only 3% of the BESS capacity in the state, while over 80% has been installed by C10 contractors who may or may not also hold a C46 license. We looked in particular at the residential sector because 2 of the 4 options were specific to the residential sector. And we found that across data sets that we used, even in the residential sector, 87 to 88% of solar paired BESS projects are installed by contractors holding a C10 license. And while C46 only contractors represent more projects in the residential sector than the commercial sector, it's still a very small amount, between 4 and 7% of the total number of projects have been installed by C46 contractors that hold no other license that would qualify them to install BESS if there was a C46 restriction. We looked across regions. So in particular, we were concerned about the availability of contractors in rural California. In California's most rural counties accounted for less than 1% of all solar-paired BESS projects in the state. And we found actually that the statewide trend was also consistent in rural California, with C10 contractors installing more BESS systems than the C46 contractors across all rural and mostly rural counties. Even considering rapid growth in rural California to bump the share of BESS in rural California up from 0.8%, there are 17 times more electrical contractors in California's rural counties than there are C46 contractors. And in fact, 10 of California's counties have no registered C46 contractors with active licenses. So this indicates that restricting C46 contractors from BESS installation, as the safety analysis concludes, would not harm rural residents in rural counties. Next, we looked at the availability of contractors. But what the previous slide, we said that rural counties had 17 times more active licenses of C10 than C46 contractors. That seems to be the trend throughout the state, roughly 20 times more C10 active licenses than C46 active licenses. There's a fair bit of overlap, about 30 or 40% of C46 contractors hold a C10 license, and those are the ones that are most active in the BESS installation space. But the sheer number of C10 licenses in the state, over 25,000 as of March when we collected this data, really should put to rest any concerns around labor shortages caused by restricting BESS work of C46 contractors. As has been noted, the main distinction between C10 and C46 contractors is who they must hire. C10 electrical contractors must hire certified electricians to perform electrical work, whereas C46 contractors do not have to follow that requirement. So we looked at the availability of certified electricians in the state, and as of March, there were over 36,000 certified electricians in California, and 11,000 electrician trainees enrolled in registered electrical apprenticeship programs. There's not comparable data on the non-certified workforce, which include many solar workers, from the Division of Labor Standards. So we looked at other data sources to try to understand what does the solar workforce look like. And we used employment, EDD data, Employment Development Department data, which showed there are over 72,000 electricians in the state. Not all of those are certified, and 4,700 electrician helpers and nearly 5,000 solar installers. So this would indicate, far more certified electricians than non-certified workers in the state working on these projects. And then we looked at the private sector National Solar Jobs Census, which is conducted by the Solar Foundation, and using their methodology estimated 4,200 electricians are at work in California installing solar, and 6,300 non-electrical solar installers. So again, even using the Solar Foundation's analysis, we continue to see the trend that there's far more certified electricians and registered apprentices than there are non-certified workers in this industry. Now, in terms of future availability, there's been concerns that restricting the C46 contractors would lead to labor shortages. And here we find it's fairly typical that that the number of electricians and solar installers will fluctuate with the business cycle. But what we find here is that in general, workers with more training show more attachment to their occupation, weathering fluctuations. They're not as vulnerable to a volatile business cycle as workers with less training. And so this is important because the certified electrical workforce, in that it is likely to be more stable over time, there's a wider range of work activities they can embark on, will likely come back to their careers even if there's a temporary layoff during a recession. And this is a real benefit to the industry, consumers and workers themselves. It can really, the certification of the workforce can really help stabilize this industry, even as demand for BESS expands in the coming years, as it's expected to. In addition, California's training programs, registered apprenticeship programs, are very flexible to respond to growing demand. Currently, there's always far more individuals who want to enroll in registered electrical apprenticeship programs than there are spaces available, because the spaces in apprenticeship are constrained by labor market demand. How many workers are needed out in the world to meet different demands? As demand for apprentices and certified electricians increases, then apprenticeships can open more positions for more workers. So it's a very nimble training system that can respond to growing demand. And there's no reason to think that a requirement to hire a certified workforce is going to stop that system from being able to flex and expand. We also looked at the cost. What might be the cost and consequences of restricting the installation of BESS, restricting the C46 contractors from installing BESS? And here we did two different things. The first is what is shown here. We looked at NREL cost benchmark data and adjusted it for California and adjusted it for electrical, higher certified electrician labor rates. So these green figures on these bar charts show the installation labor cost across different residential BESS projects. It's quite a small percentage of total project costs, as you can see, roughly 8 or less than 10%, depending. Less than 10% of project cost is due to installation labor. So what we did was we looked at the higher labor rates in California in general, which shows the first row here shows the NREL data. The second row shows our adjustment based on California labor rates. And the third row in this chart shows the installation labor cost if 100% of the work hours were performed by certified electricians paid at that higher electrician rate. And what we found is that using 100% of certified labor for BESS installation would increase total project costs in the residential sector from 1% to 2%. And this is because labor is both a small fraction of the total costs of the BESS project, and that's expected to shrink even more as BESS systems get bigger. We think this is an overestimate because it is unlikely that contractors would use the higher paid electrician labor for non-electrical tasks. So for the non-electrical tasks associated with BESS installation, contractors would still deploy a non-certified workforce and would be able to do that. So assuming 100% of installation labor is performed by electricians is a very conservative assumption, and even with that, the total project costs were very minimal. We looked at real data in California as well through the SGIP program. Project cost data is reported. So we could look at the project costs by contractor license type. And what we found here is that the most expensive projects were installed by contractors not holding a C10 license, A or B contractors with or without the C10, C46 license. That the lowest cost project, or the lowest cost installation, was performed by C10 contractors holding a C46 license. Those are the ones that are dominating the work environment. And that there was really no difference between a C10 license without a C46 or a C46 license without a C10. So actually the NREL data showed that there would be a cost increase. The actual data from California shows that there isn't outside the margin of error any increase in costs from using a certified workforce via C10 contractors. We looked specifically again at the residential sector, and the same more or less was true. In the residential sector, colored in orange here, the lowest cost projects on average were performed by C10 contractors also holding a C46 license. They dominate the market. But between the C10 and C46 licenses without the other, the costs were comparable, both slightly higher than average, but almost identical to each other. $42 difference for across the project. So again, less than what we shown, less than what we determined from the NREL data. And then I'll hand it back to Carol to wrap up the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Bethany, and thank you, Don, for presenting very powerful evidence that has led us to recommend that the CSLB limit the scope of the C46 license and preclude C46 license holders from installing BESS even when paired with solar, unless they hold another license under which BESS installation is permitted. This research shows that the current pool of BESS installers has higher qualifications than might be the case if the CSLB rules to permit the C46 license to include BESS. We see no public policy justification for the CSLB to encourage a future trajectory of the BESS industry with lower standards and lower requirements for worker qualifications compared to the present pool of contractors, which again is dominated by C10 with or without C46, but even when they hold a C46, they are required to use certified electricians. And we base this recommendation on the hazards and risk analysis, which documents substantial hazards related to this rapidly evolving technology and buttresses strongly the argument that there is a need for qualified personnel to mitigate risk. BESS technologies fall into the category of high consequence, low frequency risk, which requires contractors and their workforce with broad knowledge of electrical systems and electrical safety. Our review of the certification shows that certified electricians have the relevant skills, knowledge, and experience to confidently be classified as qualified personnel, and no such review of the C46 electrical workforce when they do not also have a C10 license is possible because there is no comparable skills standard, and therefore the workforce of the C46 contractors cannot confidently be classified as qualified. We also conclude that there will be minimal, even no adverse economic impacts and some positive impacts of precluding the C46 license from BESS. We document that C10 contractors and certified electricians are plentiful and the pool can expand as BESS increases. And this is true for residential, for commercial, for urban and rural counties. We also document no significant savings in project costs with installations performed by C46 contractors who don't hold a C10 license, even though there's agreement amongst all parties that the wages of certified electricians are higher than the C46 non-certified electric workforce. Workforce certification in general, I should say, is supported by the state of California and encouraged because it provides a clear signal to our training and education infrastructure on what schools and training facilities should train for. And it holds up wages for workers who are recognized for the skill they have. It also helps address equity by providing a pathway to family supporting jobs for disadvantaged workers. Because one major pathway, not the only, but one major pathway to certification is through the state certified apprenticeship system, which our present administration is very, very committed to and has also made quite substantial investments in pre-apprenticeship programs via the High Road Construction Careers Initiative, whose goal and whose success, who has a very successful record in bringing in workers from disadvantaged communities into state certified apprenticeship, including the electrical apprenticeship program. So for all of these reasons, again, we strongly recommend that the CSLB preclude the C46 license holders from installing BESS. Thank you very much for your attention and for the opportunity to present our research today.
Well, thank you, Team Berkeley, for that very clear and concise presentation. Do you have anything else to add? Okay, I would now, let's see. Any board comments?
Nancy?
Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. That was very informative. I just kind of want to make a few points. This has been a long, and I know it's going to be a long day, but this is a very important subject. This is, we're talking about two people, two groups licenses here, and, we've heard both sides of what's going on, and everybody has really good points when they bring it to us. We've had meetings and discussions over and over. I just want to make a point that the C10 license, when you look at that, it came about, I believe it was around, I understand around 1947, 74 years ago. And we have made improvements to it. So we've gone in and we have the electrician certification program. And I believe that one, my understanding is that enforcement authorization, 9 years now, since 2012, that we have that program. So that's been updated. We're requiring training certification on that. The C46 license, however, it's 40 years old, came out in 1981, and we haven't made any improvements yet. There's no training or safety or anything tied to that. My point being this: photovoltaic, solar, those items, the trends, the projects, technology, the things that are coming out, the way that the world is moving forward with all this new technology and all these new items, it's really important that we have to stay on top of these things. We have to be aware of, protecting the consumers and making sure that they're installed properly and that people have the proper training, and that it's not just saying or taking an exam renewal to just say, yeah, this question, I'm good at this test and I pass it. It's making sure that they get the training, they understand the training, they apply the training, that they go to the proper code classes. It's all that. And then when I look at the codes, there's two codes involved here. These are two of the biggest, all our codes are important, but this is the fire code and the electric code, and they have special requirements for that. And in it, one thing that I just kind of want to point out is that it requires that these type of systems have qualified people installing it. And when you look up the definition, and they provide that definition of what a qualified person is, it speaks to one who has skills and knowledge related to that construction or the operation of the equipment and the installation. But it also speaks to that they have received safety training. So I just think it's important, as we're all listening to this and we hear both sides and great information, and then we look at the Berkeley report, that we understand battery energy storage systems, they're a different system. They have their own sections in the books, and they're not photovoltaic. And it's important that we understand and that we're here to protect the consumer and make sure that the right individuals, the qualified people, are installing this. And just keep that in mind. That's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm going down my panelists. I got me, moderator, public affairs. Johnny Simpson, is that your hand up?
It is.
What do you got?
Well, I'd like to say that I support option 2 in the agenda packet. The current general policy to allow C46 contractors to install battery energy storage should not have been issued and should be rescinded. In light of the UC Berkeley study report and the findings therein included those listed under option 2 in the agenda packet, would you accept a motion at this time?
Motion's always in order. Is there a
I would
second?
make the following
Garitano
motion.
would like to second.
I
Okay.
move to rescind all prior CSLB staff classification determinations that C46 contractors may install battery energy storage systems, as these determinations may be applied to new projects. This includes rescinding the May 14th, 2019 CSLB letter to the California Solar and Storage Association that set forth a general policy that C46 contractors can install BSS as part of the solar PV installation project. For the purposes of this motion, new project shall be defined as any project contracted for work after the publication of an industry bulletin announcing this action. This motion does not affect the authorization of A and B contractors or C10 contractors to install battery energy storage systems. Thank you.
Johnny, that was your motion. Who was it that made the second?
Garitano, I thought you called for the second earlier, if I kind of jumped on it a little.
No, that's fine. So staff, you got the motion in the second there? I guess I'm talking to David.
We
David,
do.
do you have the
Absolutely,
motion?
we do.
Okay. So we have a motion in the second. Do we understand what Johnny's motion is?
So I
Yeah,
have
John-
this is Mary. I have a comment before we close on that.
Okay. So Mary, I don't see you on my list.
Yeah, I'm
So
not sure how to raise my hand. Sorry, technical difficulty here.
did they bring you? Oh, there you are.
I'm in as a panelist, yeah.
So let's do this. Because I started with Johnny. So we have a motion, a second on the floor, but we also looks like, so I'm the next person up is Frank Altamura. What do you got, Frank? Frank? Are you there?
Yep, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think I maybe just had a few questions for the Berkeley team, if that was all right.
Is the Berkeley team still on?
Yes, we are.
Okay, go ahead. Shoot, Frank.
Yeah, for the Berkeley team, and this might also extend to the other board members. Do you have any reason to believe that the C46 population was underrepresented in the two studies that were used?
No.
My second would be, it wasn't directly addressed in the options that the team was presented, but would a lot of the safety concerns around the batteries, such as thermal runaway and the like, be mitigated by only allowing C46 contractors to install battery systems that had certain safety features in place that were packaged units and not assembled cells?
Well, our safety expert isn't here, but from the many discussions we had with him, he was very, very careful to sort of look at all the possibilities. I don't think he would hazard to guess about future technologies if there were some breakthroughs that mitigated safety risks, but the current profile of what is getting installed and what dominates the market by far shows significant safety risk, and his analysis was based on that. I hope that answers the question.
Anything else, Frank?
Nope.
Okay, next name down that I see a hand on is Kevin Albanese, and then after I got Mary Tykert. And then that's all I got for the board. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks, Augie.
I'm really concerned here if the board's going down a road of changing guidance based upon who's doing the work. We are a consumer protection board. We regulate contractors. We don't regulate the workers. We don't regulate the market. The legislature, I think it was 7, 8, whatever years ago, created the certified electrician for the C10 license. I don't know where BESS was at that time that would have caused the legislature to include this technology in with the certified electrician. We have a regulation that's been out there for about 40 years or so. It's broad. It includes the solar contractor to install what he or she needs to install as part of the system. This BESS has been interpreted to be part of the system, and now we're going back and changing that based upon who's doing the work and based upon the Berkeley report. And my biggest concern in doing that is I have yet to see a single issue related to the C46 installing something that caused harm to a consumer, caused injury to a person because they weren't qualified as a certified electrician. I think this is a very dangerous road and very dangerous slope that we are going down. When we look at the efficiency of regulating contractors, for example, an individual can build a residential house, can show 4 years of building a home, stick framing, 3 or more crafts, and we will grant that person a B license. That B license also entitles that person to build a 60-story steel frame office building in downtown San Francisco, downtown Sacramento, pick your metropolis. We're not getting into the detail as a board. I don't think we have the capacity to get down to these fine lines, and not seeing the harm of the C46 doing something inappropriately causes me great concern to go back and change that now. And I think really sets the board up for some potential litigation on that issue. Thank you.
All righty. And then Mary Tykert, you're next.
Thank you, Augie. Well, first I wanted to echo Kevin's last comment about wanting to make sure we do this in a fashion that's consistent with the way our state's set up to allow for public comment. I think on the one hand, I really have a ton of respect and appreciation for people that have been working on this issue for literally years. And I can understand the weariness regarding how many issues have been discussed more than once and probably hundreds of times. And by the same token, this study's only been out for a very short period of time. So given that we are looking for some specific expertise on these topics, I'd like to raise the prospect of accepting the proposal that we defer this decision to allow the public to comment and review on it. I think all of us work in industries where there is a lot of actual professional detail that needs to be considered when assessing how things are going to affect the future. In this case, there's a fair amount of information in this study, which looks like it was competently and thoroughly done, but also has a lot of reliance on places where there's no data. So Nancy started this off by noting that this industry is evolving quickly. And so, for instance, to say there's no data on safety incidents, to Kevin's point, there doesn't seem to have really been any. And then two is that there aren't really any real good data sources comparable on the solar installers. So we've made a lot of inferences based on no data. So I think that highlights to me the importance of proceeding deliberately, not on this topic, because as noted, this has been going on for years, but relating to this study. So making a decision in this process feels to me like we need to give the time that the storage industry asked for to have everybody consider this and provide further input, because this is just not black and white as far as what needs to happen next.
Thank you for that. Now, I'm starting at the top again. Kevin, your hand is still up. Do you have anything else you want to say? If not, take your hand down.
Apologies, Chair. I will pull that down.
Johnny, same with you. You got anything else to say, or put your hand down?
I do.
Go ahead.
As maker of the motion, both the C10 and the C4, and I would take exception to Kevin and Mary's statements. Both the C10 and C40 46 contractors have had ample opportunity to make their industry complaints and arguments to to the UC Berkeley group and to make their arguments. We've been dealing with this for 4 years. Everybody's had their say-so. Everybody's had their input. 120 days is ridiculous. We've had 4 years. It's time to move on. It's time to put this issue to bed. And I would favor a vote today. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. Next one down is, I'm going to go right back to the top. Okay, we got a motion on the floor. David Delatorre, you're next. What do you got?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so that I am clear on the motion, the motion is to preclude a C46 from installing the battery storage systems, but it's not precluding them from, say, one of their employees is C10 certified. They would be able to install this battery system, correct? Is that the way I understand the motion?
Johnny, that's your motion.
If he is a C10 contractor, most, as we saw by the data, C10, C46 contractors, of which we have many in the state of California that carry both licenses. In fact, they are the ones that are installing most BSS systems right now, and that would not stop them from doing exactly what they're doing today. So you are correct.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Nate. Okay, so David Fote, registrar, I give you priority if it's something you need to jump in on, if you just, or is it
Yeah,
just
if I could, Augie, I just like to summarize my understanding of Johnny's motion, make sure we're on the same page. My understanding is, and I just have 4 bullets here, that his motion is to accept UC Berkeley's recommendation to preclude the C46 classification from installing the battery energy storage systems. Further, it would rescind all prior administrative correspondence or correspondence or any opinion that a BES could be installed at the same time as a solar system. He's proposing a 90-day grace period to implement this change, and that would provide time to educate the industry through industry bulletins and also to help contractors to obtain the C10 classification if necessary. And then finally, that it would not impact the A or the B or the C10 classification's ability to install a battery energy storage system within their classification.
Johnny, is that how you understand your own motion?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Somehow now this thing has gotten in order, which is cool. So Michael Mark, you are next, followed by Jim Ruane. Go ahead, Mike.
Hello. Yes. No. Back to the report. I appreciate the thorough report. I think one thing that was very key was when we're as a consumer-based agency, we're talking about costs. The cost to the consumer will not be affected. And previous board members' comments of the technological advancement of this particular industry. The C10 contractors, which there are the majority that are doing this particular work, I'm seeing is, and even most of the C46 contractors, a third of them do have a C10 as well. So the limited effect of this, I believe this recommendation is thorough. This report is great. We've been speaking on this prior to I was a board member for over 4 years now. And I agree that we should make sure this comes to a vote today.
Thank you very much. Jim Ruane.
Thank you very much, Augie, and through the chair. No pun intended, but our charge as board members is consumer protection. And this report is very, very thorough. And for me, overwhelming data indicates the preclusion of the C46 contractors to install BESS is proper. We know what we know today based on the detailed report that was given by the UC participants. Things could change in the future. This is an evolution. This is going so fast as far as lithium ion and all of these different types of things, and it's going to change in the future. But from what I know at this point in time, I think it's a consumer protection issue, and I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Jason Hurtado, followed by Diana Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make a brief point on the motion. So if the board is ultimately inclined to restrict the C46 from installing BESS as recommended by the UC Berkeley report, then I think the most legally sound and the option that carries the least risk for the board would be to very clearly change the regulation and go through the APA process. I think you have both sides arguing for and against, but I think because the board really has interpreted the C46 to install BESS when paired with the PV system, I think in order to minimize any litigation risks, it should go through the APA process. I'm mindful the board is wary about going through that process. It's a lengthy process, takes time, but I think it would ensure consistency with the law. And that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
I was on mute. Sorry about that. Michael, Jim, and Jason, please take your hands down. And then we'll listen from Diana Love, and then we'll talk about Jason's recommendation. Go ahead, Diana.
Good morning. And I just want to start by thanking UC Berkeley for their report. And I do also support the motion for option 2 under the 4 points that David Vogt spoke about. I was also concerned about legislation, but that has just been addressed. And I just want to say that one death or hazard accident is too many. We can have an explosion at any time. We need to protect our consumers, and technology is really evolving. But I want to ask one question. When we're talking about legislation, if we're going to require a 90-day grace period, do we first want to make sure that the legislation is in order before we have contractors spend money to get another license?
David, why don't you speak to that, please?
Well, yeah, the board has to make a decision as to whether or not you want to make the decision today, or do you want to have regulatory rulemaking, which could take 18 months. So, I kind of think it's a risk, I guess, a risk factor that has to be considered. Now, what would happen if you were to make the decision today that the C46 cannot install the battery energy storage systems? We would wait the 90 days and then we would begin enforcing that change. And if we had a contractor out of classification, or we have a C10 even that's doing a battery that doesn't have certified electricians, we would take an administrative action against that contractor, which could be appealed. So there's different tracks you can go. If we do take that administrative action, it could be appealed. And then it may wind up in the Superior Court, even the appellate court, to decide this. But that's one avenue. The other one would be the regulatory rulemaking. I think, as Diana Love said, though, should they wait? Well, most of these contractors today have the C10. I think we heard that over 90% of the C46s have a C10. Those that don't, we can absolutely help them to add it. It's less than $200, and in some cases, the exam could be waived. So we're willing to work with the industry to add that C10, but I just think that's what the decision the board has to make. If they want to restrict the C46 from doing, that's the first question. What avenue do you think is appropriate?
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, Nancy Springer, is your hand up?
Yes, thank you.
And then Rodney Kobos after. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, and so this might sound a little strange, but and tell me if a point of order is here, but I'm curious if Johnny would consider maybe a friendly amendment to the motion to consider the option 2 put out in the executive summary on page 5. And the reason I say that is because even though speaking to that new technology and all, it speaks to where it says the permit the C46 solar classification to install battery energy storage systems on specified residential units with the following restrictions. And then they limit it based on kilowatts and the system itself, and then you can't do any upgrades, alterations. And the reason I bring that up is because there are some technology out there and systems that are plug and play and very minor where it could fall into that category. So I don't know if I'm out of order there or not asking that, but if he would consider a friendly amendment to consider option 2 on page 5 of the executive summary piece from the report.
So what we'll do, Nancy, is we'll take whatever is left of comments. And then since Johnny is the maker of the motion, we'll give him the last word.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Rodney, what do you have?
Good morning. Good morning, board members. You know, I'm in favor of Johnny's original motion, and I just feel that, you know, a better trained workforce equals better public safety and consumer protection. So I stand with the original motion.
Thank you, Rodney. Are there any other board members besides Diana? Did you want to speak again, or is your hand up from last time?
I'm sorry, my hand's up from last time.
Okay.
I'll take it down.
Thank you. So it doesn't look like we have anyone else. Rodney, go ahead and take your hand down too. All right, Johnny, you got the last word on this.
I would like to stick with my original motion, and I would like to speak to the question of, do we need regulatory change to reverse this opinion? And the answer to that is no. The prior determination and policies were not put in place via regulation, and as such can be rescinded by the board as applied to any new projects. If a regulatory change was needed to rescind the current policy, then a regulatory change would have been needed to mark that policy in the first place. We are not making any change to the C46 regulatory definition. That language remains the same. So all we're doing is going back to the original language that the C46 license has. It does not include BSS. It is solar license. Thank you.
Okay, with that, go ahead and take your hand down, Johnny. I'm easily confused. I'm like a cat with the red light. All right, so with that, I call the question. And with that, we're going to take public comment. Public, please be advised. They have 131 people with their hands up. 3 minutes apiece. We're looking at about 7 hours worth of testimony. So once again, with peace and love, I ask that if you have the same thing to say as somebody else, go ahead and say, I agree with this position. I do not agree with this position. Speak to the motion, which has been stated several times. Shelley, are you on the line right now?
I am.
Okay, so this is what I'd like you to do. It's going to be up to you to pick each person by whatever order you have.
I have actually made record of who submitted when, so
Okay.
I have them in order as received.
And because we're not in a public venue where we can ask people to stop or slow down, at 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you to turn off their mic and move on to the next person in order for everyone to get an equal share of time. Are you okay with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Do you have the ability to give a 1 minute warning?
I do.
Okay, so let's do this. Everybody gets 3 minutes. At the when they've gone through the 2 minutes testimony, go ahead and give them a 1 minute warning. And then at 3 minutes, turn them off and go to the next person. And we're trying to be respectful of everyone's time. We understand everybody's passionate about this. Believe me, we've been dealing this for like 4 years. And I do remember Kevin running a meeting that lasted us about 7 hours about 3 years ago. So go ahead, Shelley, the mic is yours. Enjoy.
Okay, so I will let everybody know we are pushing in excess of 60 requests for comments at this moment. So again, please be patient. If you've already submitted a request, either through the chat, through the Q&A, please do not submit another one. If your hand is currently raised and you submitted a request in the chat or the Q&A, I would ask you to please lower your hand. I have you on a list. We will get to you. Please be patient.
And Shelley, one more thing. We don't want board members commenting. So if one of them winds up, they'll have another shot at it. So if one of them winds up in the queue, just bounce them to the end. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, so we are going to get the ball rolling, and we are going to start with our first submitted request, which is Jeff Matthias. I'm not sure how I pronounce it. Please excuse me if I pronounced it wrong. And again, please be patient. I have to scroll through a lot of people to find you. Jeff, your line is open. You will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So my name is Jeff Matthias. I'm one of the owners over at Synergy Solar here in Sebastopol, Northern California. With the fires, I would say most of us right now are installing solar with storage as just a standard product. I take exception to a lot of the Berkeley report. Some of the things that I just take that are given is one, there has been no California issues regarding battery storage. And while the safety issues around battery storage are highly regulated between the fire departments and an NEC, you can drive a 60 kilowatt hour nickel magnesium cobalt Tesla into your garage and there's absolutely zero recommendations or restrictions in doing so. Our systems are a third to a quarter that size. And so while we're heavily regulated, we're falling outside of criteria of most of the other battery technologies that are out there. Another thing I would say is that the biggest question I think in Berkeley that wasn't asked, that I've asked of many of our certified electricians in the area, they don't want to install solar and batteries. They don't want to have to understand the solar codes. They don't want to have to deal with the interconnection agreements with Pacific Gas and Electric. They just don't want to do them. So while there are all these electricians out there in the market, they don't want to install solar and they don't want to install battery systems. And I know that sounds crazy, but with Title 24 and the things they have to deal with, they don't want to have to pick up a whole nother slot of regulations to understand and the paperwork burden that the solar industry has taken on for years in doing this. And another one too is to consider is, Hawaii now you have to install storage and solar together. And based on that criteria in and of itself, that would eliminate the C46 in a few years if California goes that route. I think it's a really bad policy to change this. I really very strongly think what Kevin and Mary said is you guys are moving into a whole nother realm of regulation. In Coffee Park, I saw good builders and bad builders, sued builders and non-sued builders. And you guys didn't get involved in regulating the builders. You got involved in regulating the complaints. So all I can say, Synergy Solar are totally against option 2. I think it is a horrible policy to get involved in regulating policy and getting involved in situations I don't believe the board should be in. Thank you very much.